Please be seated. You sing that like you mean it. Aye. Yeah. Well, these words from Robert Weston as we begin our time together. Out of the stars in their flight, out of the dust of eternity have we come. Out of the stars have we come. Out of the sea to the land, up from the darkness to the light, rising to walk and to fly, out of the sea trembled life. This is the marvel of life, rising to see and to know. Out of your heart cry wonder, sing that we live. Come, let us worship together. We have a special guest lighting our chalice this morning. Mr. Jackson Brooks is here. And Jackson Mom, did he turn 5? 5 years old this past weekend. All right. And he looks real good for 5. He doesn't look... Yeah. All right. Can I help? Come on up. All right. Yeah. I like the energy. That one off that one. Remember? Yep. As our chalice is lit, will you read in unison our chalice lighting words? We kindle... All right, thank you, and happy birthday, Mr. Jackson.
Good morning. I'm Mary Rothschild, your worship associate, and I want to welcome all of you to Valley Unitarian Universalist Congregation, a loving, welcoming community this gorgeous morning. Whatever your heritage, whoever you choose to love, however your family is structured, and however you feel difference or sameness, you are welcome here. With this in mind, it is our great pleasure to welcome guests to our congregation, and we would love it if you would find the courage to rise as you are able so that we can greet you more fully after the service. Will newcomers please rise? Thank you. I know it does take courage to do that. There will be a welcome table to your left in the back of the church after the service, and you can come with coffee and ask any questions you may have about VUU or Unitarian Universalism more generally. And if anyone needs a break at some point, there is a comfort room to your right, which has speakers so you don't miss anything. Also, if anyone needs a listening ear this morning, Dan Schulte, our pastoral care associate, who's standing right there, will be at the front of the sanctuary following the service. Today, Reverend Andy will be speaking on forgiveness, which for many of us, certainly for me, is difficult. All of the world's religions ask us to love our neighbors and practice forgiveness when someone harms us, but it's not easy to do. At least it's not been super easy for me. And forgiveness in its many forms can be fraught. In that light, I'm going to tell you a personal story that mixes this equation up a bit that goes back more than 50 years. Yes, I'm old. It was my first year of teaching as a graduate student at the University of Washington, and I was a quiz section leader in a U.S. history survey class. The students had read an article on the McCarthy Red Scare and what it had done to America, calling people up to demand they testify if they had ever been communists and then destroying them if they had been, or if they took the Fifth Amendment, refusing to answer. It was a dark time for freedom of speech and association guaranteed by the First Amendment. So I told the class that actually, in a committee that Senator McCarthy was making his accusations, that committee was modeled on the Canwell Committee begun in Washington State, my home, by a state legislator, Albert Canwell, in 1947. And I started saying how terrible it was that we Washingtonians started this national horror, when it flitted through my brain that one of my students, who was a bit older than the average first-year undergraduate and who always attentively sat in the front row, had the last name of Canwell. Without thinking at all about what I was doing, I turned to him and asked, "Are you related to him?" And he looked at me and said, "He is my father." Though he spoke very softly, and I hadn't asked the question in my normal teacher voice, I was horrified at what I had done. Most of the class didn't hear what either of us had said, but some did, and I had behaved totally unprofessionally. I had thoughtlessly put one of my students in a terrible position and invaded his privacy. While his father deserved my criticism, I still believe that, because the Canwell Committee ruined many people's lives. I was deeply wrong to query my student. Incredibly, completely wrong. I asked him to stay for a minute after class and apologized to him. I also wrote him a formal letter of apology, saying how deeply sorry I was for putting him in such a difficult and public position. It remains, I think, the worst thing I ever did as a teacher, and I taught at universities for almost 40 years. As terrible as that was, it may have made me a more careful teacher. Not that that excuses it, but I never erred in that way again. And when I taught my graduate students how to be teachers over the years, I urged them to be careful of their students' privacy, respectful of the difficulties students may face about which we know nothing, and cognizant of the power every teacher has over their students in their classrooms. Though I was well regarded as a teacher at ASU, I still grieve over that day 51 years ago and would do anything to erase it. I have absolutely no idea if my student ever gave me the blessing and gift of forgiveness, because forgiveness is an extraordinary gift. But I know that I have never entirely forgiven myself for a terrible breach of the safety every good teacher wants their students to feel in their classroom and know in their bones. Sometimes forgiving ourselves is nearly as hard as forgiving others, and reminds me of the truth and wisdom of the line from the Lord's Prayer, which many Christian churches recite every week. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Preparing this welcome has made me think a great deal about forgiveness of others and ourselves, and I look forward to learning from Reverend Andy's sermon today with real anticipation. And now, let us settle into the service and know that we are so happy you are here. Welcome.
Please rise as you are able and join us with "Gonna Lay Down My Sword and Shield." the world. Everywhere I roam, everywhere I roam, everywhere I roam, gonna shake hands around the world. Everywhere I roam, gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Study war no more. Ain't gonna 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 study war no more.
Please be seated. We're going to invite the children to come forward now. If you have an offering, we'll gladly receive that and send it on to the UU Service Committee. If not, we want you to come forward anyway for the time for all ages. Let me pass these around.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to try a little activity about forgiveness today. And Reverend Andy's going to help us make sure everybody gets a little plastic-coated heart and a paper towel. And then everybody needs one of these markers, and I'm going to hold them over your head because it doesn't matter what color. Just reach your hand in and take one. Just take one. No looking. Just take one. Charlotte, can you reach in and get one? Okay, just grab one of these. Oh, good job. Thank you. Excellent work. Thank you. Okay, everybody just reach your hand up and take a marker. Doesn't matter what color. Just take one. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
I need one.
To reach in and take one. If you're not looking, just grab your fingers. There you go. Perfect. Perfect.
Old on to halfway cutting them long.
You can have that later. Take a marker, please.
I need this one.
Good job. Okay, does everybody have a marker and a heart? All of you out there that are not too close enough for me to reach, why don't you do this mentally without an actual heart on yours? So, what have I got to do? I want you to think about like yesterday and a couple of days ago, and I want you to draw for me on your heart how your heart felt when something. Do you need a heart? We need more hearts. We have no more heart. Right here. Oh, you have one. Okay. Extra? Okay. All right. So take the lid off your marker. Already off. Excellent. And I want to tell you that yesterday I had a really good day. My sister was, turn it over, buddy. You can show up on the other side. If it doesn't show up, you can do it on the white side. And I had a really nice day yesterday, so my heart was happy, and it was full of love, and it was a great day. So I want you to draw some little pictures on there to tell me how your day was yesterday. How did your heart feel? And you can draw on the white side or the colored side. But then, you know what? The day was over, and I had to go to bed. I wasn't happy about that. So I'm going to draw a frowny face on there because I was pouty. I had to go to bed. Did you get pouty at all yesterday? No? It was a beautiful day. How about last week at all? Did you get upset with anybody? Did you want to say "Arr" on somebody? You can draw that on there too. You can draw pictures of Friday, sure thing. You can draw happy heart pictures or grouchy heart. Okay, yes. So show me how your heart was feeling last week. Look at my heart. It was lots of different things, wasn't it? Yours was a blank heart. Oh, dear. But you know what a good thing is about your heart? Is you can forgive yourself. When somebody in your house wanted you to set the table or to share toys, and you said, "No, I don't want to do that." And they said, someone's a little grouchy today, and your heart felt a little bit sad. So what I want you to do now is I want you to take your paper towel and erase everything off your heart. And if you need a little bit of water, we can give you a little bit of water too. Look at that. See, I'm just erasing it all. I'm going to forgive myself for being grouchy, forgive myself for not setting the table. I don't have any more. Anybody else need a little bit of water? There it is. It's ready now. Nor. I don't think it's squirted. You need a little bit? I think I need a little bit too. How's it looking? Is your heart ready to start a new day? Ready to be happy? You need a little bit of water on yours? So now my heart is ready for a new day. And if I'm a little grouchy and my heart gets grouchy marks on it, I can forgive myself and start over again. Can you do that? I think that was my grandkid, so got some work to do here. Yes, you can. You can forgive yourself just like you can forgive your friends and your family. And you can forgive yourself by just thinking better thoughts and helping your heart get cleaned off. All right, I definitely want the markers back with their lids on them. If you'd like to keep the heart, you may keep it. Yes, always keep your heart.
As is our tradition, we'll sing the children out through a bridge of love. This little light of mine.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Building up world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up world, I'm gonna let it shine. Building up world, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
As the ushers prepare to receive this morning's offering, this congregation and all the work we do together, both for each other and out in the wider world, is supported by our generosity together as a congregation. So this morning, as the offering plates are passed, or maybe as you're reminded to pay your monthly pledge online, we thank you, as always, for the spirit of generosity with which you give. We enter now into a time of meditation, prayer. And so I would invite you to find a comfortable spot in your chair. Get to that place in the presence of love itself, in which we know that this is the only place we have to be, the only thing we have to do for the next little while. We're going to sing together. I'm going to offer a meditation, and then we'll sing together once more.
How can anyone ever tell you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you were less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. Can anyone ever tell you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you were less than whole? How can anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
I want to hear about forgiveness from people who have had to forgive something big. And for me, one of those people is Thich Nhat Hanh, a formerly exiled Vietnamese Buddhist monk. I want to offer a reading from Thich Nhat Hanh and then from the Dhammapada in Hinduism, and then give us some time with just soft music in the background to contemplate how these writings relate to us. This first few paragraphs from Thich Nhat Hanh. In Vietnam, there was a lot of suffering, and people became enemies of each other. In such a situation, you have to find a way to survive and help others survive. There was a peace movement trying to end the war, and many young people joined in. We had to show people the way to act properly, because if you don't have peace within yourself, it's very difficult to work for peace. Peace in oneself, then peace in the world. Our thinking was, humanity is not our enemy. Our real enemies are misunderstanding, discrimination, violence, hate, anger. And with that kind of insight, we conducted the peace movement. North Vietnamese were fighting in the South. South Vietnamese were fighting back. American soldiers were fighting. We looked upon them as victims of policy that did not come out of a right understanding. When you see the other person as a victim, you don't get angry with them anymore. You try to deliver them from the kind of view, the kind of anger, the kind of confusion that has made them like that. So hate is not born from your heart. Instead, there is compassion. And you don't see that person as an enemy. You see that person as someone you would like to help. And you see that the real enemy is confusion, the violence, the dissuasion that are there in the heart of that person. You try to remove that from them. You have to learn and train yourself how to do that, and that is really peace work. Peace work does not mean that you go down the street and shout against the government. Instead, we chanted, we composed songs, And there's a song that goes like this: humanity is not our enemy. If we kill humanity, with whom shall we live? End quote. And finally, these two sentences from the Dhammapada. He abused me, he struck me, he overcame me, he robbed me. And those who harbor such thoughts, hatred will never cease. He abused me, he struck me, he overcame me, he robbed me. And those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred will cease. Let us spend a few moments in silent contemplation.
Please sing along with me if you are so inspired. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. When all the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. Though they may be parted, there is still a chance that they will see. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. And when the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me, shines until tomorrow, let it be. I woke up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer. Let it be.
Well, if I had any sense, I'd probably let you go home now, but since I'm not long on sense, I'll talk for a minute. About forgiveness of other people. The author, Kenneth Briggs, wrote his book, The Power of Forgiveness, after a mass shooting. And this is a paragraph from that book. The shooting in an Amish community. He says, the Amish made it look simple. 10 of their little precious girls had been shot by a man who had stormed into their peaceful school in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania, on an October day in 2006. 5 had died, 5 lay wounded. As television crews rushed to the scene with their disaster faces and high noon voices, the stricken Amish gathered quietly. By spirit and habit, they were not conditioned to respond with outraged cries against the heavens or attacks on the evils of society, as others had done before the cameras in other scenes of tragedy and loss that the media had monitored. The Amish enfolded their grief within their normal circle of prayer and daily communion. They didn't speak out, they looked within. They did it together. Then they took a step that astonished many onlookers. They went to the home of the man who had killed and wounded their children to speak words of forgiveness to the man's family. They did it apparently with a debate or a long process of getting ready. They just up and went. Because that's what you do to keep your end of the bargain with God and your fellow humans. End quote. Forgiveness. Surely one of the most difficult of human topics. And I want to be clear, the kind of forgiveness that Amish community showed in that instance is extraordinary. And we shouldn't expect that of ourselves every time. Some of us have experienced deep, deep hurts which we simply aren't ready, aren't able to forgive. No one should talk us out of that decision against our wills. No therapist, no family member, no preacher. Forgiveness is about releasing feelings of resentment and vengeance toward the other person. I think it requires action, like writing a letter. Not just thinking about forgiveness, but actually taking steps toward it, and that has to happen in its own time. There's an old Taoist story that I included in my monthly newsletter column this month. I'm sure you all have already read it, but just in case... The story is entitled The Sack of Potatoes. I think sometimes with a really complicated topic like forgiveness, we're better to tell stories about it than to go right at it with a discussion of principles about how to do it. Stories get into it in different angles than propositions do. So this version of this old story is adapted from a website called pranaworld.net. One day, a student approached the master for some wisdom about forgiveness. So the master gave her disciple an empty sack and a basket of potatoes and asked the disciple to write the name of people with whom he still feels angry, one name on each potato. The master said, think of all the people who have done or said something against you in the recent past, especially those you can't forgive. Put the name on a potato, put the potato in the sack. The disciple came up with a bunch of names, and soon after his sack was heavy with potatoes. So the master said, "Carry the sack with you wherever you go for 7 days, and then we'll meet again." Now, at first, the disciple didn't think much of it. Carrying the sack wasn't particularly difficult. But after some time, it became more of a burden. It got in his way, and it seemed to require more effort to carry it as time went on, even though it didn't weigh anymore. And after a few days, the sack began to stink. Those carved potatoes were giving off an odor. So they weren't just inconvenient to carry around, they were becoming really unpleasant. And the student wouldn't go certain places because he had a sack of stinky potatoes. Well, finally, the week was over, and the disciple went back to the sage, and the sage asked, "Do you have any thoughts about all this?" The disciple said, "Yes. When we're unable to forgive other people, we carry negative feelings with us everywhere, a lot like these potatoes. And that negativity becomes a burden to us, and after a while it festers." And the master said, "That's exactly what happens when a person holds a grudge, so how can we lighten the load? We must strive to forgive." Well, forgiving is the equivalent of removing the corresponding potato from the sack. So how many of your transgressors have you been able to forgive? The disciple said, "I've thought about it quite a bit. It required a lot of effort, but I've decided to forgive all of them." The master said, "Very well, we can remove all the potatoes. Were there any people who transgressed against you this past week while you were carrying that sack of potatoes?" The disciple thought for a while and realized, yeah, there were people. And then he panicked because he knew that sack that he just emptied was about to get filled up again. And he said, "Master, if we continue like this, won't there always be potatoes in the sack week after week?" And she said, "Yeah. As long as people speak or act against you in some way, you'll always have potatoes." The student said, "But Master, we can't control what others do. So what good is the Tao in this case?" "We're not out the realm of the Tao yet," she said. "Everything we've talked about so far is the conventional approach to forgiveness. It's the same thing that a lot of philosophers and most religions preach. We have to constantly strive to forgive. It's an important virtue. This is not the Tao," she said, "because there is no striving in the Tao." And the student said, "Then what is the Tao?" "You can figure it out." She said, "If the potatoes are unpleasant feelings, then what's the sack?" He said, "The sack is the case that allows me to hold on to the negativity. It's something within us that makes us dwell on being offended." He says, "Oh, it's my inflated sense of self-importance." And she says, "What will happen if you let go of it?" "Then the things that people say or do against me no longer seem like such a major issue." And she said, "In that case, you won't have any names to write on the potatoes. That means no more weight to carry around, no more bad smells. The Tao of forgiveness is the conscious decision not just to remove some potatoes, but to relinquish the entire sack." End quote. Well, I like that story, and I hate it, because I'm not there yet. And no doubt, all these ancient stories need to be understood in context. You decide whether it fits you particularly. But there are a couple truths here that I think are pretty close to universal. First, most of us have to carry around the sack of potatoes for a while before we can get to forgiveness. It just doesn't happen on day one or week one or sometimes year one. This is no good, by the way. This is not good news for the self-help industry, who would love to sell you a book listing 10 easy steps to forgiveness in a month or less. But there are some things you can't rush, and I think forgiveness is one of them. Taoism has this built-in patience that I believe is curative for us Westerners. The ancient masters talk about sitting in muddy water and waiting for the mud to settle and the water to become clear, as an allegory for being still in life until right action arises. Acting out of principle, they talk about, not out of the emotion of the moment. So they might say, carry around the burden for as long as you need to. But when it gets tiresome, there's another way. Second, as is the case in both the Amish and the Taoist stories, the action is ultimately taken, at least in large part, to benefit the person who's offering the forgiveness. We often, I think of forgiveness as benefiting the person we're forgiving, and that's probably true, at least in part. But just as much, and maybe more, it benefits the person who needs to do the forgiving. I hear folks now and then say that some person who has wronged them doesn't deserve forgiveness. I guess I have a couple thoughts about that. Sometimes the unwillingness to forgive hurts us more than it hurts the other person. And second, I wonder if you got to know the person, assuming it's safe to get to know the person. If you got to know the person, might you find that you didn't understand their motivation in quite the way you thought you did? Not in every case, but sometimes I think that's probably true. Friends, when we are ready for it, forgiveness is one of the most powerful forces in the human experience. Take one more story. Tony Felix. He was in the news last year, but a long time ago, he was 14 years old when he did what he did. Soon after he was born, his father abandoned his family. Several years later, his mother left him with his grandfather. He struggled to form attachments until, as a very young adolescent, he saw his cousin shot to death on the street. And in 8th grade, he became a member of a street gang that operated in his neighborhood. There he formed attachment. On the day in 1995, Tony and some of his friends had been playing video games. Most of the day, they were hungry. And they decided to call for a pizza. But they didn't have any money. So they decided that they would sit outside and wait for the pizza delivery person. And when the car pulled up, they'd point a gun at the driver and steal the pizza. They waited, and when the driver, Tariq Kamisa, a San Diego State University student, pulled up, Tony pointed the gun at him and said, "Give me the pizza." The driver resisted, and the leader of the gang said, "Tony, shoot him." Tony killed him with one shot. The driver was the son of Azim Kamisa, who's a Sufi Muslim. Now, Azim went through the prescribed 40 days of mourning, but he couldn't shake the terrible anger over his loss. It was destroying him. So a religious leader told him, "Take action." So he reached out to Tony's grandfather, Ples Felix. He befriended him. Eventually, the two began going to schools together, talking to children about the power of forgiveness to overcome hate and pain. And the grandfather of the young man who killed Kamisa's son says of Kamisa, quote, "Azim and I are brothers. He's my best friend. There's nothing I wouldn't do for Azim Kamisa. There's nothing that he wouldn't do for me." Tony, who murdered Tariq, says of Azim's forgiveness, quote, "I had a man forgive me for taking the life of his son. The least I can do is forgive people who harm me," end quote. So much more powerful than a book or a sermon is the lived example of what it means to forgive. And it goes even further. Azim Kamisa started a nonprofit named for his son with the aim of stopping gang violence. And from prison, Tony, who murdered Azim's son, wrote a blog about the shame of his actions and how other kids can avoid his fate. And it was published on Azim Kamisa's website. Years old now. And after having been in prison for 24 years, he was granted parole and released almost a year ago. Azim was there to testify on his behalf and gave him a job at the foundation after his release. And the foundation has reached over 500,000 students in San Diego with presentations by Azim and Tony's grandfather. Forgiveness can change the heart of a person and thereby can change the life of a person. And a changed life shines light on the people around us, and the influence of that kind of life can begin to grow. There are very few stories as dramatic as the one I just told you. But we've all been wronged one way or another, maybe today. And we all have the power, when the time is right for us, to drop the whole sack of potatoes and do something different. It's hard. It takes focus and intention. But we can forgive. Maybe the person who wronged us was misunderstood, or maybe they really don't deserve forgiveness. But maybe you deserve to shed that burden. If that's the case, there is a different way. May we each find it in our time. Amen.
Let's take that next step together. Please rise, and we'll sing one more step. One more step. We will take one more step. There is peace for us and everyone. Take one more step. One more word. We will say one more word. Tell every word is heard by everyone. We'll take one more word. One more prayer. We'll say one more prayer. Till every prayer is shared by everyone. One more prayer. One more song. We will sing one more song. Till every song is sung by everyone. Sing one more song.
Please join with me in saying the words we use to extinguish the chalice. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
And now may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends. Amen.